He said it like he was reading off a grocery list. He said he was getting married tomorrow. He said he was taking my money, and he said he sold my house. Then he said bye. My stomach dropped so fast my hands went cold. I sat there with the phone still against my ear, listening to nothing, waiting for him to laugh and tell me it was a mistake. But the line stayed dead. For a second, I could not tell if I was about to cry or throw up. I just stared at the spot on the kitchen table where the light hits, like I might see the truth sitting there. I kept thinking, how did he even do that? How did he get into my accounts? How did he sell a house that still had my name on it? The brass key on my kitchen ring was right beside my mug. It was the same key I used yesterday and the day before that. Still, it looked wrong to me, like it belonged to somebody else now. I picked it up and my palms started sweating. I had this silly thought that the key might feel different if the house was already gone. Outside my window, late February was doing what it always does in Pittsburgh. The street light made the leftover snow look cleaner than it was. A bus sighed at the corner and rolled away. A dog barked once, then stopped, like even the dog did not want to get involved. My son called back 2 minutes later. I did not answer. Not because I was trying to punish him. I did not have my feet under me yet. I needed one quiet breath, then another. The kind of breathing you do when you are trying to keep your body from doing something embarrassing in public, even though you are alone. The phone stopped ringing. A text came through right after. It said, "Do not make this harder." It said, "I am married tomorrow." It said, "I need you to be reasonable." Reasonable. That word made my throat tighten. I looked at the key again. I looked at my chipped mug that still smelled like old coffee. I looked at the faded blue ribbon my granddaughter tied to the key ring years ago when her fingers were too small to make a proper knot. The ribbon was frayed now. I never cut it off. I laughed once, just one short sound. It surprised me. Then the laugh disappeared and left me with a question that did not have an answer yet. Did he really sell my house? Or did he just want me to believe he did? If you are listening on Voices of Emily, you can sit with me a minute. My name is Lorraine Brooks, and I am 67 years old. I'm going to tell this the way I remember it, not smooth, not perfect, just true as I can make it. That night, I did not sleep right. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing little house sounds that usually comfort me. The refrigerator clicking on, the pipes settling, my upstairs neighbor running water. All of it felt like the house was still alive, still mine, still doing its job. But my chest would not unclench. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my son in some office somewhere, smiling too wide, signing papers with my house at the top like it was his name. Then my mind jumped to the bank, to my savings, to the little account I built slow over decades, grocery money set aside, overtime money, the money I saved when my husband was still living and we used to say, "One day we will rest." I kept thinking about the way my son said bye. He did not say, "Mama." He did not say, "I'm sorry." He said bye like he was done with me. Around 2 in the morning, a car door slammed outside and the sound snapped me into an old memory. My husband used to come home late sometimes from the plant, boots heavy, shoulders tired. He would set his keys down in the same spot every night, Same little tap on the table, same breath. He used to tell me, "A key is not love, a key is access. Do not confuse the two." He said that one evening when our boy was in high school and demanded a copy of the house key like it was his right, my husband made him wait, made him earn it, made him show he could respect the door. After my husband died, I gave my son a spare key anyway. I told myself it was practical. I told myself family should not need permission. Lying there in the dark, I realized I had been handing out access for years and calling it love. That thought hurt more than the phone call. In the morning, I moved like my body knew what to do before my heart caught up. I washed my face. I stood at the mirror and looked at the lines around my eyes. Those lines were not there when my son was a child tugging on my sleeve. Some of them came from laughing. A lot of them came from holding things in. I put on my good coat with the deep pockets. The lining had a tear near the hem that I kept meaning to sew. I tucked my keys into my pocket and felt the ribbon brush my fingers. I did not call my son. I did not warn him. I did not ask him to explain. I went straight to the bank because I needed to see what was real. On the bus, I watched Pittsburgh slide by through a dirty window. Brick houses, gray sidewalks, a man asleep in a work vest, a young mother bouncing a baby and whispering something soft that made the baby settle. I wondered how many mothers have whispered calm into a child who later grew teeth. The bank lobby was warm and smelled like carpet cleaner and somebody's perfume. I took a number and sat down. The chair squeaked under me. My knees ached. A little potted plant sat in the corner, too green for that lighting. I kept looking at the door, half expecting my son to walk in, loud and smiling, ready to talk his way through my life like he always tried to. When my number was called, I stepped up to the counter. The teller was young, neat hair, careful hands. He asked for my identification. I handed it over and watched his face. His eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. His expression changed a little. Not pity, not judgment, more like caution. He said there had been activity on my accounts. My throat went tight. I made myself speak slow. I asked him, "Did it go through?" He said, "Some of it." Not everything. That was the first small mercy of the day, and it did not feel like mercy. It felt like a warning shot that could still turn into something worse. He called a manager over, a woman close to my age with silver threaded through her hair. She did not talk loud. She did not make a scene. She walked me into a small office with a glass wall and closed the door like she was protecting me from the lobby. She told me my son came in the afternoon before the wedding. She told me he was upset when a larger transfer was blocked. She told me he spoke like he had a right to do it. I asked her how he got that far. She slid a paper across the desk. It was an old power of attorney form. My name at the top, my signature at the bottom. The ink looked faint, like it had been sleeping in a drawer. I felt heat rush up my neck. Not just anger, recognition. I remembered the day I signed that paper, years back after my husband died. I remember sitting at a kitchen table with my grief open like a wound and thinking, I should not be alone in this. I thought I was being smart. I also thought my son would always protect me. The manager said the form had been revoked on file. The bank had the revocation. That was why the larger transfer did not go through. She said my son either did not know or he thought the bank would not check. I asked, "Did he say anything to you?
Anything else?" She hesitated, then nodded. She said he told them his wedding was the next day. She said he told them I would understand once I saw how happy he was. That sentence sat in the room like a glass of water nobody wanted to drink. The manager asked if I wanted to file a report. She did not push, she just offered, careful. I told her no, not today. I told her I wanted new account numbers. I told her I wanted my access tightened. I told her I wanted it done quietly. Quietly. That mattered to me more than it should have. I hated that I still wanted to protect my son's image even while he was trying to strip me down. When I left, the cold air slapped my cheeks. I stood outside the bank with my papers in a folder and felt a strange thing. Relief mixed with dread. Relief that not everything was gone. Dread because if he tried this once, what else had he already tried that I did not know about? On the ride home, the bus hit a pothole and my keys jangled in my pocket. The sound tugged me into another memory, quick and sharp. My son at 17, standing in the kitchen with a letter from school about missed classes. I confronted him. He shrugged like it meant nothing. I wanted dinner to taste normal, so I believed his shrug. My son at 25, asking me to co-sign for a car. My chest got tight when I held the pen. I signed anyway because he looked at me like I was the only person who believed in him. He missed payments. He smiled his way out of the anger. I told myself he was young. I told myself he would learn. He learned how to take. When I got off the bus, the snow on my street had turned to slush. I held the handrail on my porch steps and looked at my front door. The house was still standing, still locked, still quiet. But that did not answer the question my son planted in me. Did he sell it? Or did he just say he did to scare me into giving him what he wanted? Inside, I set the folder on the table. I hung my coat up and saw that tear in the lining again. I almost laughed. I kept thinking I would sew it later. Later is how a lot of trouble gets into your house. I pulled out the old wooden box where I keep papers. Loose hinge, cedar smell. My husband made that box in his garage our second summer in this place. He sanded it smooth and rubbed oil into the wood until it shone. He told me, "Keep what matters where you can find it." I lifted the lid and the smell hit me, warm and old. Deed papers, mortgage satisfaction letter, a faded photo of my son on the porch missing a front tooth, a little card my granddaughter drew with a crooked house and a big sun over it. Then I saw an envelope from an attorney downtown, dated 3 years back. I did not open it right away. I just stared at it like it might bite. My phone buzzed. Another message from my son. It said, "Answer me." It said, "You are embarrassing me." It said, "Do not ruin this for me." I set the phone face down. My hands were shaking now. Not dramatic shaking, more like my body was trying to decide if I was in danger. I opened the envelope. Inside were trust documents. My signature was there too. I remembered the day I signed them like it was sitting in my mouth. It started with one casual question from my son. He asked if the house was paid off. He said it like he was asking what I wanted from the store, but his eyes were too bright, those shortcut eyes. I told him yes, it was paid off. He smiled. Something cold moved through me. 2 weeks later, I sat in an attorney's office with a clock ticking too loud. The attorney did not tell me what to do. He asked what I wanted the house to mean after I was gone. I told him I wanted a home to remain in our line.
I told him I wanted my granddaughter to have something stable. I told him I did not want the house used like a wallet that never closes. Then I said the part that embarrassed me. I said I was afraid. He asked, "Afraid of what?" And I said, "Afraid of my own child." The trust was simple. I kept the right to live here. The house could not be sold without rules being followed. People were named who would have to agree. People my son did not charm easily. People who did not owe him the kind of soft forgiveness I always gave. After I signed, I sat in my car and cried with my hands on the steering wheel, not because I hated my son, because I knew I was finally admitting he could hurt me on purpose. Now, holding those documents, I felt that same cry rise up. I swallowed it. My throat burned. My son did not know. At least, I did not think he knew. So why was he telling me he sold it? Was it a bluff, or had he been digging around in places he should not have been? And who was helping him? That last question sat down beside me like an unwanted guest. Around noon, my niece called. She is the kind of woman who keeps her voice steady even when her anger is big. She asked if everything was all right. I asked her why she was asking. She said a man called her at work. He said he was my son. He said he needed her to sign something about the house. He said it was urgent. He said it was for my benefit. My niece said she told him no. She said she told him she would call me first. She said he hung up without saying goodbye. That made my stomach drop again. So he was still trying. He was still reaching. And he was doing it the day before his wedding, like he could stack lies and call it a future. I thanked my niece. I kept my voice calm. After I hung up, I sat down at the kitchen table and put my hand over my keys like they might run away. I thought about not going to the wedding. Then I pictured my son telling everybody his mother did not show up because she was bitter. I pictured his bride hearing that story and believing it because she had no other version. I did not want my silence to become his weapon, so I went. The next day I dressed slow. Navy dress, simple collar, a small leaf-shaped brooch my aunt gave me years ago. Worn edges. It looked lived in, which felt right. I held my keys before I left. That brass key, that ribbon. I set them down beside the wedding invitation like I was placing two truths next to each other. Then I put them back in my pocket and took the bus across the river. The banquet hall was full of cars. People in nice coats walked in pairs. Laughter spilled out of the entrance and made my chest tighten, not from jealousy, from how out of place my fear felt next to their joy. Inside smelled like perfume and fried chicken. Somebody had music playing low. A woman at the table handed me a program and smiled like this was a normal day. I smiled back, polite, controlled. I found a seat near the back. My son was near the front, moving around like a man managing a project. Suit fitted, hair neat. He looked handsome. That hurt more than it should have. His bride stood with her friends. Soft face, careful makeup, nervous smile. When she laughed, she covered her mouth like she was trying not to take up too much space. I watched her and felt something I did not expect. Protective. Not because she was my family yet, because she looked like somebody about to step into deep water without knowing how cold it was. The ceremony started. The officiant spoke about commitment and home and leaning on each other. The words floated through the room like decorations. When my son said his vows, his voice sounded steady. He smiled at his bride like he meant it. For one small moment, I wondered if I misread everything.
Then I heard his phone call again in my head. I am taking your money. I sold the house. Bye. The ring slid onto his finger. People clapped. Music rose. They kissed. Everybody stood. I stood too. At the reception, I stayed near the edge. I spoke to an older cousin. I took a sip of sweet tea. I watched my son dance, stiff at first, then looser when people cheered him on. He did not come to me right away. He moved through the room like I was a piece of furniture he could deal with later. When he finally walked over, his smile looked fixed. He leaned down and kissed my cheek. His breath smelled like mint and something sharp, like he had been chewing gum too hard. He said, "You look nice." I said, "Thank you." He lowered his voice. He asked if we could talk outside. We stepped into a hallway where the music softened behind the doors. Beige walls, carpet with a pattern trying too hard. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask if I was proud. He asked why the bank blocked him. I stared at him for a second because the nerve of it almost made me dizzy. Then I let a pause sit there. Silence does work if you let it. I asked him why he thought he could do what he tried to do. His jaw tightened. He said, "Do not start with me today." He said, "I already handled the house. I already have buyers." I kept my voice calm. I told him, "You did not sell my house." He laughed like I was playing. I said, "The papers you need are not yours." His smile faltered just a little. He leaned closer like height could make me fold. He said, "You are my mother. You owe me." That sentence was an old knife. I had felt it before in smaller ways. It never got dull. I said, "I do not owe you my home." His eyes flashed. He glanced toward the reception doors where laughter and cameras and people were waiting. He wanted this day to look clean. He said, "If you do this, you are going to ruin my marriage before it starts." I did not raise my voice. I did not say anything sharp. I just said, "You started it before it started." He stared at me like he did not recognize me. Maybe he did not. Maybe he expected the old version of me, the version who signed papers with a tight chest and called it love. He stepped back. His voice dropped. He said, "Fine, we will deal with it after." Then he walked back into the party without waiting for my answer. I stood in that hallway with my hands trembling, not from fear, from the work of staying calm. I went back inside and watched him laugh with his friends, watched his bride hug people and smile until her cheeks looked tired. Before I left, I went to the gift table. I had brought a box wrapped in plain paper. Inside was a quilt my aunt started and I finished, squares of blue and brown and cream. I stitched on it in the evenings while the television played. I stitched when my hands needed something steady. I set it down and wrote a card. "May you have warmth when life gets cold." Then I left without saying goodbye. I did not want my pain to become entertainment. Outside, the streetlight buzzed. My breath came out in small clouds. I stood at the bus stop and thought about the bride again. What did she know? What was she about to find out? 3 days later, my son showed up at my door. I heard him on the porch before he knocked, that heavy step, that confidence like the world owed him space. I opened the door, but I did not step back. I stayed in the frame like a hinge. He looked around my living room like he was checking inventory. Hoodie and jeans now, no wedding shine. His eyes were red around the edges, angry red, tired red. He said, "We need to fix this." I said, "Come in." He walked past me and dropped into the armchair like he paid for it. That chair has a worn spot on the arm where my husband used to rest his hand. My son did not notice, or he did not let himself notice.
I put water on for tea. My hands stayed steady on purpose. From the living room, he called out that the buyers were threatening to sue. He said his wife was asking questions. He said he needed money to keep everything from collapsing. I carried in 2 cups and set one in front of him.
He did not touch it. He leaned forward and said, "Do you understand what you are doing to me?" I let a pause sit. Then I said, "I understand what you tried to do to me." He said he did not take anything I needed. He said I had enough. He said I always had enough. That was true in the way lies can be built from facts. Yes, I had enough to keep the lights on, enough to eat, enough because I worked 2 jobs when he was small, enough because my husband did not waste, enough because I patched what could be patched. Enough is not permission. I told him I went to the bank. I told him the bigger transfer was blocked. I told him the old power of attorney did not work. I told him I changed the account numbers. His face shifted. Surprise, then rage, then embarrassment. He said, "You went behind my back." I said, "You came behind mine first." He looked away. His jaw worked like he was chewing on his own thoughts. Then I said the part that made his shoulders stiff. I told him the house was protected. I told him it could not be sold the way he claimed. I did not explain everything, not yet. I watched his face to see what he knew. He laughed, short and sharp. He said, "That is not possible. That house is my inheritance. That house is ours." I felt something sad move through me because I heard how sure he was. He truly believed I existed to hold things for him until he was ready to take them. I said, "That house is my responsibility while I am living. After I am gone, it has rules." He stood up and paced. The living room felt smaller with his anger moving around. He said, "So you planned this. You never trusted me." I wanted to say, "You made this necessary." Instead, I said the truth that belonged to me. I said, "I trusted you too much for too long. That was my mistake." He stopped like the words hit him in the chest. His face changed, quick, hurt, confusion. Then he covered it with anger again. He said, "You are choosing her over me." I knew he meant my granddaughter, the child he loves in his way, the child he spoils when he feels guilty, the child he forgets when he is chasing attention. I said, "I am choosing a home over hunger." He dropped back into the chair and put his hands over his face. For a second, his shoulders sagged. He looked younger then, not a little boy, a man who has been running and is finally out of breath. He whispered, "I just wanted one good start." That was the first honest thing he said. I kept my voice low. I said, "A good start does not begin with taking." He lifted his head and asked what he was supposed to do now. I told him, "You tell your wife the truth. You build what you promised her with your own hands." He scoffed. He said I did not understand how things worked now. I looked at him and thought about all the shifts I lived through. Factories closing, prices climbing, people moving away. I understood enough. What he meant was he did not like how things worked when he could not control them. I said, "You cannot buy respect with my money." He stood up, grabbed his tea, drank like he wanted it to burn, then set the cup down hard enough to make it slosh. He said, "You are going to regret this." I did not respond. Regret was already living in my house. His threat did not add much. At the door, he looked back at me with wet eyes he would not let spill. He said, "I hope that house keeps you warm when you are alone." Then he left. The latch clicked, and the sound landed in my chest like a stone. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my keys. I kept thinking about the spare key I gave him years ago. the way I handed it over without a second thought after my husband died. My love had been too loose, like a coat that does not button. In the morning, I called a locksmith. I did not announce it. I did not tell my son. I just did it. The locksmith was polite and fast. He changed the locks. He handed me new keys. When he left, I tested the lock 3 times, not because I doubted the metal, because I was practicing a new kind of safety. A week passed, then 2. Spring started creeping in the way it does here. One warm day that makes you hopeful, then another cold snap that reminds you not to trust too quick. My son did not call. My granddaughter came over after school and did homework at my kitchen table, swinging her foot. She asked why her daddy was not coming around. I told her he was busy. I told her he loved her. Both were true. Both were incomplete. One afternoon, my phone rang, and it was not my son. It was his wife. I hesitated before I answered. Then I picked up. Her voice was quiet. She asked if she could come see me. She said she wanted to talk, and she did not want it to be a fight. I told her she could come. I told her I would put the kettle on. When she arrived, she stood on my porch with her hands clasped in front of her like she was holding herself together. Plain coat, no makeup. Her eyes looked tired. I let her in and offered tea and a seat. She looked around my living room like she was trying to place me inside the story my son told her. The room did not match whatever picture he painted. Family photos, a crocheted throw, a stack of mail. Ordinary life. Not a vault. She said she did not know about the bank. She said she did not know about any house sale. She said my son told her the money was family money and that I promised to help with the wedding. I listened without interrupting. I watched her hands. Her knuckles were red like she had been rubbing them together too much. She said, "I feel foolish." I said, "Do not make yourself small for his choices." Her eyes filled. She blinked fast. She said she loved him. She said she did not recognize him lately. She said she was scared the marriage started on a lie. I believed her, not because she cried, because her voice did not have that shine my son uses when he wants something. Her voice sounded like a person telling the truth, even when it makes her look weak. I told her what I should have admitted earlier, even to myself. I told her my son can be sweet and still be selfish. I told her he can be charming and still be reckless. Then I admitted my part, the one that still tastes bitter. I said I covered for him. I said I made excuses. I said I thought I was protecting him. Really, I was protecting myself from the pain of seeing him clearly. She nodded slowly like something heavy was settling in her chest. She asked what it meant that the house was protected. I explained it plain. Not all the paperwork, just the truth. I told her the house could not be sold on a whim. I told her it was arranged so my granddaughter would have stability. I told her I did not do it out of spite. I did it out of fear and love in the same breath. She stared into her cup like she was trying to see the bottom. After a moment, she said, "He told me you laughed when he called you." I did not deny it. I looked at my key ring on the table and said, "I laughed because he thought he could take something I already protected. I also laughed because I realized how little he understood about what it costs to keep a home." She sat with that. Her shoulders lowered a little, like a person setting down a bag. Before she left, she asked if I hated him. That question caught me in the throat. I said, "I do not hate my child. I do not trust him with my keys." At the door, she turned back and said she would tell him they needed counseling. She said she would get a job again, even if he did not like it. She said she would not live in a fantasy. When she walked down my steps, my wind chime rang soft behind her. The street looked ordinary again, but something shifted. Truth entered their marriage, whether my son liked it or not. Summer came. My porch plants grew uneven. The heat made the house smell like old wood and sun. My granddaughter spent more time with me. Park days, ice pops from the corner store. She asked fewer questions about her daddy, like she was learning how to protect herself young. Then one evening in late July, my son showed up again. He stood on my porch like a man who did not know if the ground belonged to him anymore. I opened the door and waited. He looked thinner, shadows under his eyes. He held a folder in his hand, like somebody had been handing him papers he did not want to read. He asked if he could come in. I let him in. I sat him down. I did not offer food right away. I learned something about pacing. You do not sue the person out of consequences too fast. He said the buyers were not real buyers. He said it was a man he met through a friend. He said there was supposed to be a quick loan to cover wedding costs, something temporary. Then he would pay it back. He avoided certain words like they could turn into a confession if he said them out loud. I did not push for every detail. I did not need the whole ugly shape. I just needed to hear him admit he gambled with my life. He said the man was threatening him now. He said his wife moved to her sister's place for a week. He said she told him he had to tell me the full truth or she was done. Then he looked at me and said, "I messed up." The sentence came out small. I nodded once. I said, "Yes." He flinched, like he expected me to soften and rush in with a rescue. I did not. I told him I would not save him with money. I told him I would help him with steps. I told him I would sit with him while he made calls. I told him I would watch my granddaughter while he went to appointments. I told him I would not sign away my home. His eyes filled. A tear slid down and he wiped it fast like it embarrassed him. He said, "I thought you always would." I said, "That was my mistake. I trained you to believe my boundaries were pretend." He stared at the floor for a long time. Then he whispered that he did not know how to fix himself. I did not give him a speech. I did not give him a quote that would look good on a wall. I said, "Start by telling the truth even when it makes you look bad. Pay back what you took. Let people be angry and do not run." He tried. Not clean, not steady. Some days he showed up and did the work. Some days he got defensive and tried to make it somebody else's fault. He still had that habit of turning his fear into anger. There was a night in September when he called me loud, voice sharp, and said the counseling was making his wife's side against him. He said everybody was judging him. He said I started all of this with my paperwork. I listened. I let him talk until his words ran out. Then I said, "You started it when you tried to take what was not yours." He went quiet. That quiet was different than anger. It sounded like a man finally hearing himself. After that, he did not change overnight. He did not become gentle just because he felt shame once. But he began doing a small thing that mattered. He began coming back after he cooled down. He began saying, "I was wrong," without adding a reason to make it softer. He took a second job for a while. He sold some things he loved more than he should have. He stopped asking me for money like my name was a bank. He started calling me to ask if I was all right. In October, the leaves on our street turned early again. My granddaughter brought home a school photo with a gap in her smile where a tooth fell out. I laughed when I saw it. This time, the laugh felt warm.
My son came by that weekend. He stood in my kitchen watching me cook, like he was trying to remember how to belong in a room without taking from it. He asked if he could take his daughter to the movies. I said yes. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a key ring. He held out the spare key I gave him years ago. No ribbon, just the metal. He said, "I should not have had this." I took it from his hand. My fingers closed around it, and I felt the years inside that little piece of brass. I placed it on the table beside my own keys. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not cry. He just stood there, like he was waiting for me to decide what kind of mother I was going to be now. I said, "I love you. I will not be afraid in my own house." He nodded. He swallowed hard. He said he understood. A week later, we went to the attorney's office. Not because I needed to, because my son asked. He said he was tired of guessing and pretending. In that office with the ticking clock, the attorney explained the trust again, in plain words. He explained who would have to agree to any sale. He explained why it was built the way it was. My son listened, face shifting like weather. Anger first, then embarrassment, then something quieter. He asked, "So it goes to my daughter?" The attorney nodded. My son stared at his hands and said, "I thought it was going to be mine." Nobody shamed him. Nobody scolded him. The attorney just said it was meant to be a home, not a payout. Outside on the sidewalk downtown, people hurried by. holding coffee cups and bags like our family truth was nothing to them. My son said I should have told him. I told him he was right. I said I stayed silent because I wanted peace. I said silence was not peace. It was delay. He nodded slowly. He did not argue. Winter came again. Snow heavy, porch steps needing salt, the kind of cold that makes your bones complain. On Christmas Eve, my granddaughter fell asleep on my couch under that quilt, the quilt I gave them as a wedding gift, blue and brown and cream squares, warmth stitched in. Her parents came later that night. They stood in my living room together, awkward at first, then softer. My son looked around the room like he was seeing it again, the worn spot on the armchair, the family photos, the key hook by the door. He said, "I almost lost all of this." I did not answer right away. Then I said, "You almost lost yourself." He nodded. His wife reached for his hand. He let her. Life did not turn into a neat ending after that. There were still arguments. There were still months where money stayed tight and tempers ran short. There were days when my son's old habits rose up like smoke and he had to fight himself to put them down. Sometimes he got it right. Sometimes he did not. But the difference was, he stopped pretending taking had no cost. He stopped talking like my sacrifices were his inheritance while I was still breathing. One night, months later, I sat at my kitchen table with my chipped mug. The refrigerator clicked on. The house settled around me. I held that brass key and ran my thumb over the grooves worn into it. I thought about the first night he called, how my body went cold, how I laughed once, how the silence in my kitchen felt like a test. I understood now why that key felt heavier. It was not just metal. It was access. It was everything I handed out too easy. I stood up and hung my keys back on the hook by the door. The blue ribbon swung gently and settled. Outside, a bus sighed at the corner and pulled away, the same sound as that first night. The house stayed quiet, not triumphant, not bitter, just still here. And I was still here too.